Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Yankees take 2 of 3 in the Subway Series from the New York Mets at Yankee Stadium in Juan Soto's return. I was fortunate enough to be at games 1 and 3 of this series, which the Yankees won both of them. So if only I went to all 3, maybe they would have gotten the sweep. And it is one of those still frustrating things where it's another series where the Yankees could have easily won all 3 games. I've been saying this a lot, and the good thing is it's still series wins. Whereas there was a point in time where they would lose these close games and it would lead to them losing series. They still have not been swept all year. And the record could easily be better than 27-19. And not really, I don't want to harp too much on the game 2 loss, but that was the Yankees could have certainly won. And I guess game 3, look, that was a game that was tied 2-2 going into the 8th inning. So it's not as if, that was, even though the score looks lopsided, that was a close game. And the Yankees, you got to feel pretty good at the moment if you are a Yankee fan for many reasons. And Juan Soto comes in and the Yankees really shut him down for the most part. He goes 1 for 10. Believe he ends up with 4 walks, I think. He had 3 in the first. He had 3 in game 1. And then I believe another one in game 2. Went 0 for 4 in game 3 and really just didn't make a huge impact the way that you would expect. I mean, again, the Juan Soto from last year, you didn't see that in this series. And, his beginning as a Met has been, I don't know, mediocre. I'm not sure the right word, right? Because, for Juan Soto standards, yes, I think mediocre is a fair word, right? For normal baseball standards, like 822 OPS is still good. 246 batting average is probably slightly above league average, but, it's just, this is not the Juan Soto that I think anyone expected. And look, there's still so much season to go. But look, the Yankee fans booed him as you'd expect. I don't expect that to change as long as Juan Soto visits the Bronx. It's always going to be that way. And he had a couple of big moment opportunities and just did not deliver in those spots. And where I want to kind of go on the flip side, to me, leaving this series, and I think whether it's recency bias in terms of game 3, right? Because, when I do these episodes, obviously it's, shortly after the last game of the series. That's fresh in your mind. But even beyond that, right? Looking at the whole, Cody Bellinger had one fucking hell of a series where he extends his hitting streak to 13 games, just goes berserk, gets 3 hits in game 1, homers in game 2, and then game 3 reaches base all 5 plate appearances, good for 3 hits. He had a 2-run double in the first inning and a grand slam to put the cap on this series. Good for 6 RBIs in game 3. His numbers, he's up to 258 batting average with a 789 OPS, which is remarkable considering where he was just a few weeks ago. I mean, but that's what a good baseball player does. Like Cody Bellinger, that's why. And it did get frustrating, right? I mean, there definitely were episodes here where, I was critical of Bellinger, but there were also ones right before that where even though we struggled, I said, hey, look, I think that he is one that will turn it around. Whereas, like, let's say Jazz Chisholm stayed healthy. I don't know. For that, I also think he would have turned it around, but probably not to this level. Um, and a lot of good things to say about him. And it's just pretty cool that, you know, there was not one direct replacement for Juan Soto. It couldn't possibly be done. But if there was, if you were to say one person, it would be Cody Bellinger for many reasons. He's an outfielder like Soto. He bats lefty like Soto. And I guess the comparisons end there, but like, I guess you kind of look at it as Max Fried, Cody Bellinger, and Paul Goldschmidt as kind of the 3 people that were brought in that in a way replaced Soto. Now, look, if Soto was brought back with the Yankees, you would think that at least one of those guys would have still been in the mix. I'm not sure who it would have been, right? I can't speculate on that, but it's not as if none of them would have been Yankees. There's a good chance one of them would have been. But what I can say actually is Cody Bellinger probably wouldn't have been, right? Because like where the fit wouldn't have made as much sense. In fact, yeah, there's no way because Soto would have had, it would have been Soto, Judge, and Dominguez and Grisham. I mean, Cody Bellinger would not have been a Yankee. Now, like, look, I'm not even trying to do a one-to-one comparison because Juan Soto is better than Cody Bellinger. Like, that is the facts. But based on what we're seeing, and certainly based on what we saw in the series, it's not a crazy difference. And Bellinger is very he's versatile in terms of positionally, hustles like hard. Where Soto, there was a play in Game 3 where he grounds out to LeMahieu where like he just kind of didn't really run out of the box, but also he's just really good. I mean, he's a sound baseball player. And so it's exciting to see what he could do. But that's kind of where I wanted to kind of lead off here. Um, but what's pretty cool too, let's jump into game one. Yankees returning and like long tenured Yankees, right? Where DJ LeMahieu obviously made his season debut in Seattle, but he started games 2 and 3 of this series, and he looked pretty damn good actually, especially in game two. So that's encouraging. But Jonathan Loaizaga, he is activated off of the IL, and it took me by surprise. I didn't realize he'd be back this soon. I thought maybe another week, but Loaizaga pitches games 1 and 3, and that's great. It really further solidifies this bullpen. And so the lefty Tyler Matzik was designated for assignment. Really, it was going to be Matzik, or they could have, I guess, sent down Yuri De Los Santos. We'll talk about De Los Santos because his outing wasn't the best in game one of the series, but Matzik goes. He just simply didn't do good enough. And I'd expect him to probably latch on elsewhere, would be my guess, but Otherwise, go back in the pen. Um, as far as the lineup was concerned, Ben Rice was the odd man out for game one and game three. Game three was against a lefty. Game one wasn't, but you are starting to see Rice not play so much. And I still think, hey, look, it's a bit of a rotation, but one that's changed, right? Like Cody Bellinger, I can say now he's no longer part of that rotation. He just isn't with the way he's playing. I still think Goldschmidt and really Goldschmidt, he had a really nice series, games 1 and 3 specifically. But Goldschmidt, I do think versus the odd righty, he could sit, but for all intents and purposes, it's really Rice, Grisham, and Dominguez that are kind of part of that rotation. But it does kind of seem like right now Ben Rice is the one that is kind of getting the short end of the stick. But remains to be seen where we go from here. And then, as far as that second base, third base situation, basically, like as far as the positions, LeMay has been exclusively at second, and Peraza's basically been exclusively at third, and Bebas is the one that kind of switches over depending on the situation, where he will basically be playing second when Peraza's at third, and Bebas plays third when LeMay's at second. Um, the pitchers for game one would be Carlos Rodon against Tyler Megill, which is advantage Yankees. Like that's the thing. The Yankees won the games where they, were the ones where the pitching matchup was to their advantage with Max Fried pitching game three. Um, you know, the Yankees on paper won the games that they were more likely to win going in. Um, and Rodon and Fried, honestly, like it was a bit of a grind for both of them. Look, the Mets have a really good lineup. They do. Um, and but yet they get the job done. And Rodon picks up the win. He's up to 5-3, 5 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, four walks and 5 strikeouts. So the 4 walks a lot. At least 2 of them were to Soto. Um, but overall, again, 102 pitches in 5 innings is not great efficiency, but still, the 1 run in 5 innings, it's hard to complain with that too much. Tyler Megill, on the other hand, did not pitch well. 2 and 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 4 runs, 5 walks, and 4 strikeouts. So Megill, the loss brings him down to 3-4. He's really been on the decline for the Mets, and when all is said and done, he may not last in that rotation when they get a little bit healthier. So the Yankees get on the board first, and that would be the case in all 3 games where the Yankees would take the early lead. And this one comes in the third inning for the Yanks. And look, like, what? Actually, let's start from the top because we have to. Juan Soto's first at bat. And again, I was there for game one. Pretty cool moment, right? I mean, that's the one I was gearing up for. And look, Soto did walk, right? So the Yankees didn't get him out of that first at bat. Soto works the walk, which is, pretty typical Soto, right? I mean, when you think about him, that's really his bread and butter beyond all the other stuff. Like, he's got a great eye. Um, He's not going to chase out of the zone much, and he walks first Rodon. And then he's still second on a play where Soto was really out dead to rights, and Rodon for some reason threw to first, not the second. If Rodon goes to second, Soto's tagged out easily, but for some reason he didn't do that. And so it goes down as a steal. Then a very nice play by Oswald Peraza at third on a line out by Pete Alonso. And Pete Alonso had a pretty rough series. But he hit the ball hard there, and Peraza made a great play. So the Mets don't score that inning. Let's jump ahead to the bottom of the third. And getting it started was your beat Bebas. And for him, like, he really makes a big impact in game three. But here, not to be forgotten, gets leadoff single. Then, after a Grisham ground out and Judge walk, it leads to a situation for Cody Bellinger, first and second one out, where he singles, infield single to Mark Vientos. And it was just good hustle by Bellinger. Not many players are beating that out. Vientos is not the best defensively at third, to be fair, but still, like, Bellinger, it's a pleasant surprise, honestly, like the speed and the hustle. And so it leads to a Paul Goldschmidt at bat. And look, the Yankees, it was a fortunate inning, but Mets were a little bit sloppy. And Goldschmidt gets an infield single to Francisco Lindor, but Lindor makes the mistake of trying to get Goldschmidt at first. He didn't have a play. He should have eaten it and just lived to fight another day. Instead, he throws to first, Goldschmidt safe, and Alonso cannot corral the scoop. It allows Judge to score. Bebas already scored. Judge scores, and then Bellinger to third, Goldschmidt to second. That, to me, opened up the floodgates. So not a great job by Lindor, getting his 7th error of the season, and Alonso as well, not to come off the bag and maybe, kind of hold everyone where they were. Then Dominguez walks, and Anthony Volpe gets a sac fly to make it 3-0. Austin Wells walks, and then Oswald Peraza with the bases loaded walk to make it 4-0. A very, very good inning for the Yankees there. Just working the count, making Tyler McGill's life a little bit more miserable, and he has to be taken out of the game before the end of the third inning. Max Kranick gets Bebas to pop out. So kept the game within arm's reach for the Mets. Juan Soto gets a leadoff walk in the fourth and actually eventually scores on a Brandon Nimmo RBI single to make it 4-1. And look, like, that inning wasn't great for Rodon, but he's able to limit the damage for sure right there. And then in the fourth inning, Yankees scored 2 more runs. Judge, who was, very good in game one, and 3 was good too. Game 2 was a struggle for Judge, a rare one, but he had a tough one in game 2. Game 1 was good. Bellinger doubles to make it second and third, 1 out, and Paul Goldschmidt gets an RBI single to make it 5-1, and then Jason Dominguez an RBI ground out where he beats the potential double play to make it 6-1. So a nice quick response by the Yanks after the Mets scored that 1 run. And then Rodon finishes out the 5th. Paul Goldschmidt, a fantastic play on a pop out by Tyrone Taylor. So the Yankees flashing some leather. And the score remains 6-1. It would remain that way for a while. Jonathan Loaizaga makes his debut in this 2025 season and pitches a scroll of 6. There was a double in there by Brandon Nimmo, but other than that, no runs against, which is what you're looking for. Mark Leiter Jr. comes on in the 7th, same sort of thing. He gives him a double to Tyrone Taylor, but it's a scoreless inning nonetheless. And then in the 8th, Devin Williams, ironically, going up against Pete Alonso, who he faced twice in the series. The, of course, famous Pete Alonso homer off of Devin Williams in the playoffs last year in Milwaukee. But Williams strikes out Alonso. In fact, he strikes out the side. So Devin Williams is getting better and better, which is a really big sign for this Yankee club. And then the top of that, Yuri De Los Santos comes into the 6-1 game. And, this didn't go under the headline as anything overly important, but to me it kind of was, and it did, to me, potentially cost them in game 2. De Los Santos looking to just end the game. 1 out walk Alvarez, 2 out walk to McNeil, who was a pinch hitter, and then Francisco Lindor was just a good piece of hitting with a double down the left field line to make it 6-2, second and third, 2 out, and Luke Weaver has to come in. And Luke Weaver had been used a decent amount prior to that. But the fun thing is that it sets up a Weaver versus Juan Soto matchup. Now, look, if Soto hits a 3-run home run there, the Yankees are still winning, right? So it takes a little bit of the juice away, but still, like, Alonso's on deck. Things could have happened there. But Luke Weaver, as he does, he attacks the strike zone. The great thing to Luke Weaver is he's fearless. It works for him, and he gets Juan Soto to fly out to end the game. So kind of a fun and fitting way to end that one. And just a well played game by the Yankees overall. Honestly, like this was a pretty solid game. Took advantage of some Mets mistakes, but really ultimately, and the theme of the series, Yankees pitching did well overall. So they win 6-2 in game one in Soto's first game back. Game two is one of those frustrating Yankee losses that we've seen a lot this year, where, a few things happen differently and they win the game. So for this one, it would be Trent Grisham who would be the one that would start out on the bench. Uh, Austin Wells gets a day off, day game after night game, where JC Escaro would be in there. And then it would be actually DJ LeMahieu and Bebos as the combination with Peraza on the bench. And for the Yanks, Clark Schmidt did pretty well. Fourth inning wasn't great. And the walks aren't great either, but 6 innings, 3 hits, 2 runs, 5 walks, 5 strikeouts. For Clark Schmidt, 6 innings, 2 runs, that's good stuff. And now that's 3 straight starts with at least 6 innings, and that's good. So he certainly gave him a chance to win. And then for the Mets, Griffin Canning, who's been a bit of a revelation for them, the former Angel, 5 1/3 innings, 7 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. The Yankees started to get to him by the end of his outing. Sixth inning, he started to get hit around a little bit, but he did the job for the Mets. And the Yankees, they're the ones that take the lead. Clark Schmidt does strike out Juan Soto in his first at bat, which was nice. But in the third inning, it's DJ LeMahieu hitting his first homer of the year. And he was pretty pumped up. And why not? It's been a rough go of it for him the last few years as far as injuries and effectiveness. And LeMahieu homers off of Canning to make it 1-0. But the Mets respond. Leadoff walk to Lindor, which you can't do if you're Clark Schmidt. A single for Soto, his one hit of the series. And then Pete Alonso with an RBI single to make it 1-1. Then Nimmo strikes out Loki. And then the problem was that Juan Soto steals third. That was one that was costly because it leads to Mark Vientos hitting a sac fly to make it 2-1 Nets. Like, it's little things like that. And Schmidt, he was lucky to get out of there with just the 2 runs, though. I mean, Beatty flies out to Judge with the bases loaded, 2 outs to end that inning. But Schmidt does settle down, which was good. Fifth inning, a bit of a curious non-decision by Boone, where it's first and second no out, Escara and LeMahieu on the base paths, and it was Bebos up, and he strikes out swinging, and no bunt there. And look, Bebos ends up kind of proving himself in a way in game three, and I do think that there's a bat there. I think that with time, Bebos is someone that really can be a major league hitter. But then Rice lines out and Judge grounds out. If they had gone the bunt route with Bebos, they maybe score there. So they still stay down 2-1. Schmidt pitches his last inning in the sixth inning. And then Cody Bellinger, who almost homered the night before. I should have mentioned, he had one to the track in the eighth inning the night before. This one goes out, no doubt about it, shot. Sixth homer of the year, ties it up at 2. And then with 1 out, Dominguez singles, then Volpe singles make it first and third, 1 out for the Yanks. And then that leads you to a situation where they take Griffin Canning out and bring in Brazaban for the Mets, and Escara grounds out to Alonso, and they get the out at home. Dominguez is out at home. That's actually kind of, I didn't even thought about the fact that that's very similar to game 3, which we'll talk about, where Alonso fucks up the throw and Dominguez was the one that actually scored. Escara, it doesn't work out here. And I thought in the moment, maybe they could have pinched it, Wells or Grisham. I digress, I mean, but, like maybe it was a little too early being in the sixth inning, but I thought about it and it didn't work out. And then LeMahieu grounds out to end the inning. Seventh inning, leadoff single off of Clark Schmidt. They bring on Mark Leiter Jr., and he is able to get out of it, although a very good defensive play by the Yanks, where Tyrone Taylor doubles to left. Jason Dominguez unable to get there again. Dominguez defensively, for me, it's a bit of a scary thing out there, but Cody Bellinger, I think, is a really good center fielder. Maybe even more, I like him more than Grisham out there in center, me personally, but makes a nice play off the wall, throws to Volpe, who throws to Escar, and they get Beatty out at home. A pretty bad send by the Mets, considering the situation. If they just leave Beatty at third, it's second and third, 1 out for Lindor coming up. But the Yankees get a really big out there, and they get out of the inning, which was nice. And DJ LeMahieu actually made a really nice play to end the inning as well. Grisham pinch hits for Bebos in the seventh and grounds out. We'll go to the eighth, and Tim Hill comes on and gets the lefties out, but sandwiched in between is an Alonso double. That's the risk with Tim Hill. very good against lefties, but is susceptible versus righties. And then Fernando Cruz comes on and strikes out Mark Vientos. So good job by Cruz there, but not exactly in the ninth. We'll get there soon. But the bottom of the eighth was a frustration for the Yankees, where Reed Garrett is on for the Mets. Um, and we'll get to two outs, no one on. Dominguez walks, and then Volpe doubles. I really wish a couple of things here. I wish that Dominguez was running on the play. No steal attempts in that at bat, which was a bit perplexing for me. And then as well, Rojas probably could have sent Dominguez. Um, you had a chance, they didn't do it. Then Escara hits for himself and walks, and then LeMahieu smacks one to right, but right at Juan Soto. So that was tough, right? That was where they had a chance to take the lead right there and don't do it. And so they leave Fernando Cruz on, which here's the frustration. Luke Weaver was unavailable because he had to come in because Yuri De Los Santos could not simply finish game one. And so now you go down the pecking order. So what probably would have been Weaver or maybe Williams in that spot ends up being Fernando Cruz. And I like Fernando Cruz, but there's a reason why Fernando Cruz is where he is in that pecking order. And even though he finished out the eighth inning strong, the ninth inning was not the best. A one-out walk to Luis Torrens. You can't do that because then they pinch run Luis Angel Acuna. Brett Beatty gets an infield single on a tough play for LeMahieu. Not going to give him any crap there. That was a tough play. And then Cruz hits Tyrone Taylor. This is the problem with the Reds that Cruz had is the hit by pitches, the walks. That happens. And he fucked himself, not because they were hitting him hard, just, self-inflicted wounds. And then Francisco Lindor, it's a sac fly to make it 3-2 with Acuna, the runner. That worked out for the Mets. Smart by Carlos Mendoza. And, it's one of those things where the communication between Bellinger and Dominguez wasn't great. So Bellinger was kind of flat-footed. So had no chance getting that at home. And the Mets take a 3-2 lead in the ninth inning. And then Soto grounds out to end that inning. Bottom of the ninth, Edwin Diaz comes on. And what does he do? He gets the job done. And Austin Wells, not a good at-bat for him where he ends up striking out. I know Diaz is nasty. I get it. But Wells could have walked, didn't, which was frustrating. And then Ben Rice lines out to third, and then Aaron Judge, who had a very tough game, strikes out to end it. So not a good loss for the Yanks, one that was there for them in many different occasions, but they really weren't able to get the big hit. 0 for 6 to runners in scoring position, 9 men left on base, and Fernando Cruz, ineffective in the ninth, drops to 1-2 on the season. And Aaron Judge was 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts. So that leads us to the rubber game, which, again, I was at game 3, game 1 and game 3. And it was a fun one. It was another fun one at Yankee Stadium. And Max Fried on the mound, which was cool to see him in action. And look, a bit of a grind for him, but overall, I walk away. He was pretty impressive. And kind of in some ways got better as the night went on. 6 innings, 3 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 8 strikeouts for Fried. His ERA moves up to 1.29, which is still sparkling. But it's a no decision for Fried. So still stuck on 6 wins, 6-0. And the Yankees are 9-1 in his 10 starts. For the Mets, David Peterson, he gets the job done ultimately. There were 4 walks in there, but only 2 runs and only 1 earned, 3 hits in 6 innings, the 4 walks and 4 strikeouts. So he wasn't overly dominant, but certainly did his job. And then in this one, Ben Rice on the bench again, like he was in game 1. And then not unexpectedly, Bebas against lefty sits. So you have DJ and Peraza in. Paul Goldschmidt leads off versus lefty, that whole thing. And in the first inning, the Yankees get on the board. And it's a second and third 1-out spot. There was an error by Vientos to start the inning that allowed Goldschmidt to reach. There was a grand roll double by Judge as well in that first. But Cody Bellinger past Alonso down the line, a 2-run double for Cody gives the Yankees a 2-0 lead there. But the Mets would strike back in the second, where Fried, it's a kind of a lucky single for Vientos, where Fried got there but couldn't make the throw, and then Nimmo walked, and that was a problem. But a couple of strikeouts by Fried puts him in a good situation. But McNeil, and I had a feeling that McNeil would be first pitch hunting, and he was. Not a great pitch by Fried. RBI single McNeil to make it 2-1, and the score would remain that way for a little bit. Judge makes a really nice catch on Lindor in the third inning, which was good. Then let's see. Let's go to the fifth. Leadoff walk McNeil. Jeff McNeil was a thorn on the Yankees side in this game 3. And then a sac bunt by Acuna, ground out by Lindor, gets McNeil over to third, sets up Soto, runner on third, 2 out. And before the at bat ends, it's a wild pitch by Fried and McNeil scores. So good bit of base running by McNeil. It sucks that Wells couldn't keep it in front of him. I guess it's kind of hard to blame anyone there, but it ties it up at 2. And that was a bit of a demoralizing moment. But and then kind of bittersweet. Soto strikes out. And Soto's numbers as you're running the score position, it's something along the lines of 5 for 37, which is nuts to me. When I think of Juan Soto, I think of this guy is the best with runners in scoring position. This year, quite the opposite. Um, Fifth inning, this is where we're going to start talking about Anthony Volpe. Anthony Volpe sucked in this game, and it was really, really fucking frustrating. Basically, with Peterson still in there at this point, Volpe is up with bases loaded, 2 out, and he grounds out. This wasn't even my most frustrated at bat for Volpe. It was a first pitch, ground out where they kind of worked around Judge and Bellinger, quite frankly, to get to him. Fried finishes out the 6th strong. And then we go to the 7th where Jonathan Loaisiga is in. And Loaisiga, he really looked very good. He almost had an immaculate inning where the first 7 pitches were all strikes. Struck out Beatty on 3 pitches. Struck out Alvarez on 3 pitches. But then McNeil, after he got the first strike on him, 4 straight balls. So that wasn't great. Then Acuna reaches on an error by Peraza at third. Oswald Peraza cannot be doing that because his bat has not been nearly anywhere good enough for him to be fucking up in the field. Now, again, Peraza is a good defensive player. That was bad, though, and he can't be doing that. So it extends the inning in a scary spot against Francisco Lindor, and he lines out to Judge. That could have been bad. So Loaisiga starts out good, gets into some trouble, then it's a defensive issue, but Lindor lines out. And then in the 7th is where Volpe fucks up again. And it's Brazaban that comes on, and it's a 2-out rally by the Yankees. And it's a couple of walks, Grisham and Judge, and then Bellinger gets an infield single. Bases loaded, and really at this point, Brazaban's been losing the zone. And it's a 3-0 count on Volpe. Takes strike 1 on the 3-0 down the middle, right? You wish he threw a ball, but he didn't, and whatever. But then from there, Volpe swings at 3 straight balls that would have given the Yankees the lead, and it was just bad. 3-1 pitch inside, 3-2 pitch more inside, and then the last one was down and in, not even close. Just a poor job by Anthony Volpe. Hated that, really. And Volpe batting 5th isn't ideal. And I know that his numbers versus lefties are really good, actually, fantastic. But I don't love him batting 5th, really under any circumstance. And I understand given the options. I do when I look at this lineup, but maybe you can figure it a little bit differently. But yeah, in that moment, I'm thinking, okay, I get it. That's how you lose games. Luckily, they didn't do that. 8th inning, Devin Williams comes on and pitches a 1-2-3 inning. Soto ground out. Alonso lines out. So Alonso against Williams again. This time he hit it hard. And then Vientos strikes out. So Devin Williams kind of on the rise and, still want to see what happens there. But slowly but surely, it's getting better. And then Ryan Stanek, the former Ray, comes on for the Mets in the 8th inning. Leadoff walk Dominguez. And then a LeMahieu strikeout. And then Austin Wells doubles into the corner. And Dominguez didn't really get a good read on this. Honestly, when this was hit, I'm thinking, okay, maybe Dominguez scores. But he doesn't. Gets the second and third, 1 out, and it leads to a huge at-bat for your beat Vivas. And it ends up being an 11-pitch at-bat where he started out 0-2. Then it's 3 straight balls, then foul after foul after foul. And he hits a ground ball to Pete Alonso. And here's the thing. So I'm giving Vivas more credit than not because of the great at-bat. But the fact of the matter is he hits a ground ball to Alonso that really should have been made successfully. Dominguez runs home from third, and Alonso absolutely airmails it. One of the worst throws you'll see. Again, a really tough stretch for Pete Alonso after a red-hot start. And it makes it 3-2 Yankees. So that was obviously gigantic. But then what they do is they tack on more. Paul Goldschmidt with an RBI single. And Goldschmidt's really just one of the best situational hitters still in the game. It's really just a game changer having to be on the Yankees. Makes it 4-2. Austin Wells scores there. And then the lefty Genesis Cabrera comes on for Stanek. Grisham walks, bases loaded, 1 out, and Judge actually strikes out. But then Cody Bellinger, with such a great moment, hits a grand slam. 7th homer of the season. Juan Soto leaps in right field, but cannot come up with it, and the Yankees take an 8-2 lead. So Luke Weaver sits down, and Sam Hill comes on. And again, it's frustrating that what happened with Weaver, where he was unavailable for game 2, maybe it changes the outcome. And here now Weaver's not used. Um, but for Bellinger, just what a night. 3 for 3, 6 RBIs, got the grand slam. And then we go to the ninth inning, and Sam Hill does the job. 1-2-3 inning. Yankees win the series. Devin Williams gets the win, improves to 2-2. And the Yankees are now 27-19 with a healthy lead in the AL East. I mean, the closest you got right now is the Red Sox and Blue Jays, who are both 2 games under 500. So, as far as the American League landscape is concerned, the only ones that really are better had been the Detroit Tigers, and it's quite the story for them. But the Yankees, the run differential is really good. The Yankees' record could be so much better, and they've had key players out as well. So, got to give them their praise, but it's also frustration too, because we could have easily been talking about a sweep, but nonetheless, very pleased with the series. It was these were fun games to go to. I'm sure in a different way, those City Field games in July will be very interesting as well. But this is fitting. The fact that it was Juan Soto going back to Yankee Stadium, and he was really shut down. He really, really was, and give the Yankees credit for that. Um, and now they will stay home and finish up their homestand before a long road trip, actually. And these will be 3 games against the Texas Rangers in Texas. They are 25-23, and they're going to be one of those teams. They're going to be in that AL West conversation and the playoffs as well. So Texas, in a weak American League, is probably one of the better teams, I would say, roster-wise. Game 1 will be Patrick Corbin against Will Warren. It's been a bit of a turnaround for Patrick Corbin, having left the Washington Nationals and now joining the Texas Rangers. He's not great. I don't think he's one to fear, but the numbers look a hell of a lot better. And Will Warren will continue to try to, he's looked good lately. So that's something to keep an eye on. Game 2, the return of Ryan Yarbrough, who we haven't seen since the last game of the Athletics series. So it'll be a bit of a layoff for him. There is rain in the forecast for Wednesday and Thursday, so look out for maybe a potential doubleheader or postponements. And Jacob deGrom. So that'll be interesting. deGrom, who's been injured a lot as a Texas Ranger, the former Met, will be on the bump versus Yarbrough. Then game 3, really the best matchup of them all as far as just head-to-head. It's Nate Eovaldi, the former Yankee, versus Carlos Rodon. So this will be a nice test for the Yanks. It will. I think that Texas, even though their record isn't amazing, look, you're facing deGrom and Eovaldi in games 2 and 3. So that's definitely legit. So, the Yankees get it done versus the Mets. In Juan Soto's return, Cody Bellinger goes absolutely insane. And the Yankees take 2 of 3 from the Mets, improve to 27-19. And like I said, will continue their homestand against the Texas Rangers.